Theater Addicts. This is Anina. I'm at the review stage, aptly reviewing the Fancy Brain show, The Reckoning. It is by FBS Productions, and it features, and I think is written by, Francis Bryan Shaw. I'm very excited to see this. It's a one-man show. I've always enjoyed one-person shows. They're usually very reflective, very personal, and I think that this will be one of those. It says that it kind of talks about the use of a little bit of chaos in the world. I've always thought that chaos is probably a good thing, and I function pretty well in it, so I expect that I will enjoy the show. It's supposed to be witty. Francis is a comedian, and so I've always loved comedy. If you can make the darkness in the world seem funny, I'm there for you. So I'll let you know how the show goes. I hope that you will also see it and let me know what you think. Hi Theater Addicts, this is Anina, and I just saw the Fancy Brain show, The Reckoning. Unfortunately for this show, it was a stand-up comedy show. It was the stand-up comics' worst nightmare. We had a very, very tiny audience, and we were a bit shy of laughing. And as we all know, a stand-up comedian thrives off of people laughing really loudly at their jokes. It helps the energy, it helps everybody else laugh, it really just creates for a good environment. And so unfortunately for Brian, we're all just kind of a little bit quiet today. That being said, Brian had some excellent stories. The stories were original, interesting, stories I haven't heard in a bunch of comedy shows before. And even though he's engaged now, he didn't necessarily just focus on being engaged the whole time, which is awesome. He had stories about cows being born, and I learned a new word, or a few words. It is fetal bovine serum, which you'll have to find out what that is, but it is gross, funny, and interesting. I felt that I wished he had used a little bit more physicality throughout. You know, one of the things that really sells the show to me is if somebody kind of acts out the thing they're telling us as well. And he stood there, he told it really well, but I think with his nerves, he didn't necessarily embody every story the way I would have loved for him to do. I also felt that while his stories were so excellent, he needed to just savor them a little bit longer. You know, give us time to absorb the story, because he sometimes moved on a little bit quickly between his transitions. And, you know, while there's so many interesting things, it would just be good for us to kind of like have them for a little bit longer, to sit with them and wrestle with them. The show was very vulnerable. I loved that he told so many personal stories, that he really made a connection in that way, where he worked on telling us things about him that you don't necessarily expect a comedian to tell you all the time. Things that kind of make him very human and make him relatable in a very specific way. The show promised that it would be kind of political and funny, and there was one political part in it. And it was a political part that I felt may fall flat a little bit if you have too many people in your audience who kind of don't vote the same way you do. That being said, I thought that he did also incorporate a little bit of local content. It's always nice to hear something mentioned that you are familiar with, and he did that very well. And I just wish him a good time in his life. One of the main points that he kind of rose in his show was he talked a lot about how the comedian's brain worked, and I enjoyed that as a theme, because to be a comedian, I think you have to see the world in a different way. You have to kind of look at everything outside of the box. You have to be able to see the strange and funny things, and sometimes sad and humorless occasions. And I think he did that with, he explained that really well. It was even a theme he could have carried on more. He could have told us more about the things that he thought when he was in weird situations. And I think one of the great things about a comedy show is that it can sometimes take the mundane and make it really interesting and fascinating. And while he did some of that, I think he could have amplified some of those stories just a little bit more. This is Anina for Theater Addicts. I just reviewed the Fancy Brain show, The Reckoning. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope if you have anything to add, anything you'd like to say, you can also write that in the comments below. You can follow us or subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can also find us at theateraddicts.ca.